Here are some tips that I find helpful in the kitchen, and I hope they will be helpful for you too.
Okay.
One of my favorite items to use is parchment paper. I'm pretty sure most of my videos, if you watch them, I'm pulling out parchment paper for this or that because it just helps with cleanup so much. I try not to use a lot of aluminum foil in the kitchen, especially if I'm heating it up at a very high temperature, because there are studies to show that the aluminum will leach into your food, and I am just trying my best to prevent things like that happening in our bodies for as long as I can. So far, parchment paper is great because one, it's compostable, so I can just chuck it in the compost. Our city composts for us, so that's super helpful. And I'm just going to show you some other things I do with parchment paper. But first of all, the very first time I ever saw parchment paper in use was for this recipe. There's spaghetti in there, and this was being served at one of my favorite Italian restaurants. And they come out with this plate, with this parchment paper package, and then they open it up at your table, and it's spaghetti inside. So I thought that was pretty cool. I'm going to use a parchment paper to freeze my tomato paste. Now, a lot of you have seen me use tomato paste that I've pulled out of the freezer in some of my videos. And so I'm just going to teach you or show you how I do that and why I do that. A lot of people will use ice cube trays to freeze their tomato paste, but I find that by freezing it this way in little flat discs, it actually will defrost much easier and quicker in whatever you're cooking. I will even use parchment paper under the broiler, and I know that it may burn because, well, it is paper after all, but I try to make sure that all the edges are tucked underneath, and I'm only putting it in there for a few minutes. Be mindful of using the parchment paper if you're going to use it under the broiler. I found the least expensive place for me to get parchment paper is at Costco, and this is just the Kirkland brand. So tomato paste, there's 156 mils in each can. A little can of tomato paste can go a long way if you freeze it. Most recipes will only call for a tablespoon or two, and that irritates me to no end because I have thrown out so many cans of tomato paste because I didn't think to freeze it, and I didn't know I could freeze it. But now that I have, a can can last quite a long time. 15 mils is what a tablespoon is. So in each of these little cans, there's 156 mils. I can't actually get 10 tablespoons in here. I probably, because you know what? Because I'm always estimating. See, to me, that looks like a tablespoon. So I will just space them out. And I'm going to fold it in half. And just squish them to discs. And then every time I need to use one, I can just cut off an edge. And then I can just throw this into a freezer bag and throw it in my freezer. My next tip is reviving a baguette. If you're like me, you can get baguettes at Costco, but they come two in a bag. We often will just eat one, and then we're left over with the other one that will go stale almost immediately the next day. That it becomes hard as rock. But you can revive that baguette by running it under water, wrapping it up in foil, putting it in a 350-degree oven for 10 minutes, and then unwrap it and bake it for another 10 minutes just to crisp the edges out again. And when you slice into it, it's like it never happened. Fresh out of the oven.
It's like bringing a loaf of bread back from the dead.
Back to life. We go through a lot of Parmesan cheese, so I like to buy the giant blocks from Costco. Not a whole wheel, just a block, so it's just really a sliver of a whole wheel. I prefer grating my own Parmesan cheese. I know you can get like the freshly grated stuff in the deli section, but I always find that that doesn't melt as well, and I totally avoid the one in the green can.
Not naming names.
A way to preserve your Parmesan cheese is to wrap it in cling wrap and then wrap it in foil. And that will prolong the life of your Parmesan. And I recently heard from a friend who's Italian that they do the exact same thing. So I know I'm on the right track there. The idea is to keep moisture out of the cheese so that it doesn't mold. Lately, I've been vacuum sealing them and that's been okay so far. Another thing you can do with Parmesan cheese is not to be wasteful. When you get to this part of the cheese, which is, I guess, I don't think you can eat this part, it's really hard. And this is the outer rind. What I do is I will cut them into smaller pieces, wrap them up, and toss them into the freezer. When I need some Parmesan flavor, I will toss this into my soup or I don't know, something else that I'm cooking that I just need the flavor and not necessarily need the cheese. One of the things I dislike the most is having the smell of garlic or onion or fish on my fingers after cooking. So I have discovered that you can rub your fingers on stainless steel and it will remove the smell. Now, I suppose you can use like the blade of your knife, but if you're accident prone like me, that's probably not advisable. So I discovered this little stainless steel bar and, you know, like a soap bar. And so under the water, I just rub my fingers and the scent will come off, which to me is amazing. Then I don't have to smell like garlic and onion and fish.
Unless you like that kind of thing.
Oh yeah, unless you like that kind of thing. Nothing smelly here, because I just rubbed it away.
Yeah, she just likes smelling her fingers.
So there are my tips for today. If you like them or have some tips of your own that you'd like to share, please leave them in the comments below. If you like this video, please click the thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you don't already, and come find me on Instagram. Till next time, be simple, ordinary, and joyful.